Or the first session's in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and you go from your hotel, and it's in your phase delay zone of your PRC. It's shooting you back. It's shooting my clock to Hawaii, and I'm in Montreal. I get into the convention center by 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm hiding in the dark, through lunch. I'm missing the phase advance portion. I'm not getting any light at all, consequently, it could be the case where every day I get more and more tired because my clock is actually moving west. It's not moving east. And there are situations in which people actually will end up shifting their clock all the way around in the wrong direction. We call it antidromic reentrainment. It can take a long time for that to happen. Did you have a question?
I had a question based on the temperature.
Yeah.
Like how would you, like for a layman, how would they determine when it is a certain time frame before you wake up?
Well, yeah. It would be nice for us if we had some kind of device that, well, you can take world temperatures, but really we use a rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is that your body temperature minimum is about 3 hours before your habitual wake-up time. And so habitual wake-up time would be the time that you're comfortable waking up on a free day where there's no alarm clock. Or if you have a very regular wake-up time. So if your alarm clock goes off at the same time every day, you're more or less comfortable getting up at that time. So that would be the anchor point that you would use. So designing, so in preparation for a trip east where you want to move your clock forward to get more on Eastern time, if that was an advisable strategy for, let's say, an early afternoon game back east. The strategy then would be in Vancouver would be to get up a little bit early on the few days before the game and to seek out really bright light first thing in the day. That's going to help you. For trips in which you want to avoid phase shifting, then when you get to Montreal or wherever it is in the Eastern time zone that you're flying to, you actually want to avoid light early in the morning. So you can maintain your Pacific Standard Time timing. In situations where you're flying over many time zones, then this becomes really valuable. So for individuals that have personal trips, that have other teams that they might play on, national teams that are somewhere else on another continent, these kinds of schedules can be really valuable. There's a variety of other things that may or may not affect circadian timing and that may be used for travel. Melatonin is one thing that's commonly used now as a sleep aid. It's not technically a hypnotic, but it does have some sleep promoting value. There's also some evidence that it can shift the circadian clock in a manner which is a little bit different from the light, where light would be phase delaying the clock, melatonin would be phase advancing the clock. So the timing is somewhat inverted. The melatonin is much weaker, where there is significant evidence the effect sizes are much smaller. But the way that you would use it for flying east is you would take it a couple hours before bedtime. You would take it in a low dose is probably the best way to take it. So where most of them are, they're sold in like 3 milligrams, a half a milligram is actually probably a better solution. And with higher doses, you can actually have a bit of a hangover effect in the morning. But there isn't any evidence that it affects athletic performance. So studies in which that's been looked at, there's not been any evidence shown that it detracts from athletic performance in using melatonin. Hypnotics,
So with melatonin, if we're going to travel east
yep.
and stay on Pacific time, you would recommend like a bedtime 12 or 1 o'clock,
yeah.
East Coast time, and then we take melatonin around 12 or 30.
Well, I just wouldn't take it at all.
You wouldn't take it at all?
No, if I was trying to stay on Pacific Standard Time.
Who slept on flight and want to sleep late at night, just make sure they get a good sleep.
If you want to get a good sleep, the best thing to do is to go to sleep at your usual bedtime. So, what are athletes,
They'll sleep on the flight. Some of them will
Yeah.
sleep on the flight.
and when is the flight?
Many times we've arrived at like 11 p.m. Heathrow.
I see.
So we get to the hotel 11:30, 12 sometimes. We can get to the hotel anywhere
Yeah.
between 10 and 12.
Yeah,
And then they've slept on the flight.
and then you have a game the very next day.
No,
So there wouldn't be a game the next
we
day?
have a training the next day.
Okay. So you never fly the day before a game, you always have at least one day in
It
between.
depends.
Hmm.
Last year, and a lot of times, West Coast teams will fly out on Thursday and then train Friday, play Saturday,
Yeah,
and then fly back Sunday.
yeah,
So the athletes who slept on the flight, we had training in the morning on Thursday, got on the flight, they slept for a good majority of the flight, they land, they eat, they're hungry, they eat, and then some of them won't be able to go to sleep.
correct. They've had a nap and they're also trying to go to sleep in their so-called wake maintenance zone. So, yeah, I've had that horrible experience of landing in Halifax and not being able to fall asleep till 5 o'clock in the morning and then having to get up at 6 o'clock for a conference that starts at
So does melatonin play a role for those athletes that try to take it before they go to sleep at 12?
Well, if they're trying to go to sleep early, do you ever have the luxury of literally staying on Pacific time? So you would land there in the evening at 11 o'clock, but just pretend it's Vancouver time still. Go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, get up at 11 o'clock the next day.
That depends on how we manage the next day.
Yeah,
Depends on if we're sleeping in.
Yeah, but it's easy. I mean, if we know that we have to stay on that time zone, we can manage the next day fairly easily, and also
Yeah.
we can educate them not to sleep on the plane. That helps, yeah.
yeah. Well, sleeping on the plane, taking a nap in the afternoon if that's something that they commonly do. The issue about being able to fall asleep, it all depends on when you have to get up the following day. If there's no harm in sleeping in until 11 a.m. in the morning, then they can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, watch movies in the hotel.
But you're saying.
But what happens if that's the night before the game now? So obviously if this year we decide to fly on Friday to play East Coast on the Saturday, would you still advise that? If we've got an afternoon game on the
It's an
Saturday,
Yeah, it's an
we
afternoon.
arrive at 10 o'clock on the Friday night,
Yeah,
ideally we don't want the players being awake at 3 a.m. on the Saturday morning.
no, that's pushing it for sure.
So
Yeah.
then we should advise on that.
Well, if it's an afternoon game in the east, then my suggestion would be to move everything forward, starting a couple days before the game. Where possible, I would instruct players to try to advance their entire daily routine forward by an hour. And that's where melatonin can help, even back in Vancouver. You can do this, you can get on Eastern time before even flying. If you control exposure to light, control your bedtimes, use melatonin. If you want to move everything forward, you can do that in Vancouver beforehand. And that would be my recommendation. My recommendation would not be going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning on a day where you've got a 1 o'clock in the afternoon game, or whatever it is they start, is it 1 or 2?
The potential issue for that is going back and forth, because they're bound going back and forth. So we're on East Coast time by the time we leave Sunday morning. Well, we're still on East Coast time by we leave Sunday, come back to the Pacific,
Yeah.
and then we're changing back to Pacific time.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I like the idea of if you have the luxury of staying on Pacific time, because if you do adapt to Eastern time, then of course you have to readapt to Western time when you come back. It depends on the scheduling. So if you have a full week between games, then readapting to Western time is a breeze, really. It's much easier to fly west than east. For most people, you'll always find somebody saying, well, I have an easier time going the other way. It could be. But for most people, going back west, you'll adapt to that within a day or two. It's much easier to accomplish that. But if you have a game that's happening soon after you come back, or if you're on a road trip, let's say, you've got I don't know how, usually you've got a week between games, don't you? There are a couple maybe that's 3 or 4 days.
Every once in a while we'll come back on Sunday and have
that's still a decent window. So it's not as big an issue coming back. It's more of an issue, I think, for East Coast teams again. Chronobiologically, the West Coast teams are at the advantage overall. I'd have to say that's something that that's positive to take out of all this. Yep.
Can you comment about screening, computer exposure and where that fits in terms of that light stimulus and what impact that has?
Yes.
How we should strategize that?
Well, I have an iPad, and you never know how these things are going to affect your life. But now I find that I'm going to bed, and I'm pulling out my iPad and I'm reading the sports pages at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting all this light. So the other day I got myself a pair of safety glasses, an amber lens, and I put them on top of my reading glasses. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I was reading my iPad with sunglasses on. I kid you not. Now the safety glasses come in a lot of different. I mean, they're for welders and there's various kinds of glasses that you can use. But I went for an amber lens that didn't have too much. That had a fair amount of light transmission, so that I could see. But I was blocking out